Senior enlisted Army official chimes in on his belief on the Second Amendment on military installations. Plus, we have statistics on firearm-related deaths here in the United States over the last couple of years, also for kids. And we also have statistics on how many guns are actually purchased here in the United States on a yearly basis. And lastly, we also have defensive guns, defensive uses of firearms used here in the United States, and how those statistics kind of match up or compare to violent crime. We have all that next here on Fronsite Focused. Hey y'all, it's Chris from Fronsite. You know what really gets on my nerves is when the media takes somebody that was in a position of authority or power and uses them as an example of, hey, this person also agrees that we shouldn't have guns. So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently instructed military installations to allow for the carry of their Second Amendment rights, or the enforcement of Second Amendment rights, so soldiers can carry. But former senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former Corps Sergeant Major, William Gainey, said that the policy was really just a bad idea. He said, and I quote, "I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that everyone has the right to defend themselves." Then he goes on to say that soldiers should not be carrying weapons. We've got MPs to do that. Now, that's a problem because you're basically saying, I believe in your Second Amendment right, unless you're in certain places. Well, that's not what the Second Amendment says. The Second Amendment says you should be allowed to carry and protect yourself. So Army veteran and Fort Hood shooting survivor Alonzo Lunsford said things could have probably been a little different had he been allowed to carry his firearm on post. He specifically said he had cover, so as soon as the rounds started popping off, he could have retrieved his weapon and handled the incident right then and there. And that's part of the issue we see is everyone thinks that just because we have MPs to do something means that we shouldn't be allowed to carry firearms. Well, if you don't understand this, the military and military bases, the military is a mirror basically of society. So you have these military installations are like mini cities. And so these little tiny towns or little tiny cities around your town don't allow you to carry firearms because they have police officers carrying their guns. Well, cops can't be everywhere, just like in society. So you have to have the right, you have to have the ability to defend yourself and somebody else in case somebody does get through. So Lunsford went on to say that he also agrees that there should be some limitations, but people should be allowed to carry on post. You should probably also have some kind of training. And I don't disagree. There should be training involved if you want to carry into a certain location. The restrictions part, I'm not sure I agree with, but at least I do agree with the training portion, right? Have a list of things you should do to make sure you are trained and proficient to carry on that installation. But what happens typically, and this is the big warning, what happens typically is the military takes something that can be very, very simple, and they find a way to make it uber complicated. If this is going to be the direction that the Secretary of War decides we need to go as a society, as a military, then we need to make sure it doesn't take forever, or there's not some impossible list of demands that service members have to accomplish or do or go through before they can carry on post to protect themselves. Because what happens is they'll start doing it, and if it's optional, they'll start doing it, and they've done things like this so often that they're like, you know what, it's not even worth my time. So we don't need to do that. We need to make sure it is easy enough that they can get on there, file for whatever permissions they need, maybe sign up for a class or two, and go teach your people, go train your people. The more people in the military that are trained and more proficient with firearm usage is going to pay off dividends in the future, especially if we do go to an extended war somewhere. Now, the Sergeant Major did go on to say that, well, you shouldn't have to carry on post. We have MPs. It's a secure facility. You know what they do when you get on post? They check your ID. Yeah, they check your ID. They don't search every vehicle. So if someone intends to do harm, it has an ID card and is in the military or maybe a dependent, and they want to do harm to people on post, all they got to do is go through the gate. As long as they don't get checked, you're fine. Like, they can get right through. So what are you going to do? Search every stinking vehicle? That's not really possible or feasible or practical even. So you really need to make sure that people are allowed to carry, because again, if someone does get through the gate and they happen to be somewhere else where there are no MPs sitting around, it's going to take a while for the MPs to get there. How much damage can one person do until the MPs get there? That's the problem. So the last thing he said was he believes that we're making a mistake that we'll never recover from. What mistake that we'll never recover? I don't understand the mistake. Is the Second Amendment a mistake that we'll never recover from? How will we not recover from it? Now, this will lead into something I'm going to talk about later in the video about defensive uses of the firearm. But what mistake are we not going to be able to recover from? I don't understand it. And instead of having these short little snippets, and maybe he did say something about how or why. The media needs to do a better job as to explaining some of this so we can have that discussion. I don't mind having a discussion with somebody, and if they prove me wrong, then so be it. But I need to have that discussion. We as a society need to have that conversation. So they also went on to say that it's not exactly the same as carrying around town. And again, I've already covered this. A military base, no matter how big or small it is like a town or a city on its own. Just like an aircraft carrier is its own city, right? It's got all the stuff it needs to survive all in one location. So what's the difference? Is it because people are wearing uniforms? That's the only difference. Because, people on a military base have the same jobs that people off post have for the most part, right? You have your electricians and plumbers and contractors and different things that do all that stuff. You have MPs. Okay, cool. You have people that do the job of that military installation. So like an Air Force base, you have pilots and you have mechanics and you have a whole. So what's the deal? What is different? I don't understand the difference. So if you think there's a difference, you want to describe it down below in the comments for me, do that. Let me know what you think. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes going forward with this new memorandum signed by Pete Hegseth. Mass shootings. Let's define this first before we really get into this. So a mass shooting technically is defined as a shooting event where 4 or more people are shot or injured or killed. So you can look at a lot of different shootings from across the country that would fit into. But a mass shooting, that's the number 4 is where they kind of stop. So I work with a lady who contracts with us, and she's an awesome lady. I love working with her, and she also teaches at the local college. And she said that one of her students from overseas, exchange student, is researching gun violence in the United States and how he can't believe how bad it is here in the U.S. Well, it's because we're one of the only countries that allow you to own firearms, right? Look at England. Right now, England is having a knife epidemic. People, they're looking at banning ninja swords and stuff. That's just crazy, right? So violence is violence. And so I wanted to take a minute to really kind of talk about, the numbers a little bit, some of the statistics from the last couple of years, and really kind of hit on what the numbers actually look like. So today, as of 2026, in 2025, we had a drastic reduction, and in 2024, we had a drastic reduction in mass shootings. There were fewer mass shootings than there have been since 2019. 2019, 2020, everything kind of got really high in that time frame. And last year, in the year 2025 and 2024, they dropped dramatically. So something happened that caused mass shootings to drop. I think it's great. It could be a lot of different things. Lack of reporting or things like that. But typically, where I got this information from, all that will be in the description below. This is not a right-wing bastion of conservatism media site, right? Most of them aren't. Shooting deaths also started to plummet since 2019, 2020. 2020 is really the high peak of when shootings kind of were happening. And ever since then, it has been going down steadily. But this past year, it went down even further, which is great. I think the numbers, if I'm not mistaken, were 14,700 deaths from shooting deaths in last year. Another point of note that you should probably realize is when people start talking about deaths, they always, especially if they're against guns, they always bring up, think about the children. Oh, the children are dying from guns. Gun deaths are the number one leading cause, or firearms are the number one leading cause of deaths in juveniles. Well, that's true, right? But there is some context to that. If you take out, and juvenile includes anyone under the age of 18. If you take out the 14 to 18 crowd, right? Gun deaths result, don't even on the list, right? Not even on the list. The reason you take that out is because, I don't know why, again, I've been in law enforcement for 20 years. These kids are getting younger and younger and younger, and they're shooting people. shooting themselves, shooting each other. It's gun violence, which I hate using that term, but violence using firearms against another person. These people are getting younger and younger every day. So I don't understand why. That's something else that for somebody else that's a lot smarter than me can research and figure out. But we need to take that in context. Just regular old kids living their lives, very, very, very unlikely to be killed by gunfire. So if we take out all the gang violence and the youth shooting each other for drugs or for whatever because they're in a gang, then that number drops dramatically. But good news, we have had a drastic drop. I think it was down 15%, if my numbers aren't mistaken. They dropped 15% last year since 2024. So that's awesome. That's a good drop. That's in the right direction. Is it enough? No, it'll never be enough, but it is trending in the correct direction. So let's talk about firearm sales. So typically when people think about guns and think about how many guns, man, America has a gun behind every blade of grass. And that was actually a quote from a Japanese general. It's why they didn't want to invade the continental United States. They just hit Hawaii and they were kind of done. Because that would have been a bad day for them, right? So, yeah, we have a lot of guns in the United States. In fact, there are more guns in the U.S. than there are people.
Pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
That's because good gun owners like myself own more than one gun. But you know what? Those trends typically change typically based on who the president is. So as of this past couple of years, the last 2 years, our gun sales have dropped. In fact, they have dropped by several thousand over the last couple of years. Several million, excuse me. So last year we sold 14.7 million firearms. And now there's a difference, between rifles, long guns, and pistols, right? They have that broken down. But the highest gun sales ever were in 2020. Shocking, I know. 21.8 million firearms sold in 2020. Now, why is that? Well, a lot of times you have people that believe that when a Democrat president gets in office, they're going to take away all of our guns and gun rights. And so they just buy as much as they can. Just buy. And when a Republican gets in office, they're like, whew, we're good. We don't have to buy a bunch of guns anymore. You see the same thing trending with like NRA memberships, right? Memberships go up when a Democrat's in office and they come down when there's not. You get more money when there's a Democrat in office. They get less money when a Republican's in office. It's kind of weird. It's kind of the opposite of what you would think. So the problem is that some Democrats in some states are after your guns. Look at California, look at New York, look at Virginia. There's several others across the country that really don't like guns. Their governors don't like guns at all. Their legislation doesn't like guns at all. And a lot of those people are really feeling the pressure. You can't carry certain guns with certain magazine capacities or certain things in certain states. Why? Because they're infringing. They think they have the right to infringe on your rights to bear arms. They always refer to some guns as weapons of war and all this other stuff. And you know what? Okay, cool, whatever. But we have to have these weapons to defend ourselves against other people that have those weapons, right? Take the government out of it. Any random, drug dealer can go buy a gun from wherever, come in and shoot up me in my house. If I don't have a gun that can do the same thing, that's a problem. Joe Biden would say, just buy a shotgun. Okay, yeah, shotguns are okay for certain things, right? And I'm not going to disagree with that. But I prefer an AR. That's just me, right? So you should have the right to bear arms. It should never be infringed. And if you live in one of those states, the only thing you can do is either move or vote those fools out as best you can, right? But really, in some of those states, your best bet's probably to move. All right, let's talk about defensive uses of firearms and those statistics. So I just gave you a little bit earlier the numbers on how many gun deaths or how many times somebody died based off of a firearm, right? Well, let's look at how many times a firearm has been used to defend somebody. So and the studies always vary a little bit. You'll see numbers varying between 60,000, which is very, very low, to 2.5 million, 3 million or so. And those numbers vary because sometimes some of the studies will say, hey, when have you ever felt threatened and went for a firearm? Not just drawn it, but like gone for it or thought about it. So the questions they ask might be a little different. So that's one of the reasons why the number is a little vague. But we're looking at 60,000 to 2.5 million. The most common average that they use is 1.82 million defensive gun uses every year. 1.8 million. Now, if you think about that, how many people die from gun violence every year? Well, this past year, it was what, 14,000, right? So 14,000, and even the smallest number possible, 60,000 defensive firearm uses of firearm. Well, you'll hear a lot of times people say, if it saves one life, like the COVID shot, if it saves one life, yeah, if it saves one life. Same thing about guns. If it saves one life, well, it's 60,000 right there, and that's the smallest number. 1.8 million, it's a pretty big number. So realistically, if people start saying, well, we got to save lives by getting rid of guns, getting rid of guns doesn't save lives. Getting rid of guns only puts law-abiding citizens at greater risk for being robbed or shot and murdered, right? That's a problem. And even if you did get rid of every single firearm on the planet, you're still going to have some kind of violence. Look at Australia, look at England. They have knife violence constantly, right? And then someone will eventually, but again, if you can't get rid of all guns, but even if you could get rid of all guns, guns did not exist anymore across the planet. Someone's going to find a way, right? Look at prisons. Prisons are a really good example of, if you get rid of every type of weapon, they will find a way, right? That's how shanks came, a shiv or a shank came to be, right? So you have to understand that just getting rid of guns is not going to make anyone safer. But if you enable people to defend themselves and their families, you will keep people safe. So next week on Wednesday, I'm going out to Houston for the NRA's convention. I'm really looking forward to being out there, meeting a bunch of people, and giving a speech on how Fronsite is going to change the way we communicate as an industry and as a community. Been working on some things. There's a new update out. So if you have downloaded it already, make sure you update that app. If you haven't already, go to the app stores, both on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, and you can download Fronsite today. Now, there's a little trick to it because we're not that popular yet, because it's just coming out. When you click on Fronsite, or when you type in Fronsite, there's a blue thing at the top that says, did you mean Fronsite? And it says exactly the same thing you typed in. Just click yes, and it'll come up. I have no idea why that does that, but hey, it is what it is, right? So get out there, tell your friends about Fronsite, download it, get them to download it, and then get on there and start answering questions or asking questions and talking to people. Well, that about does it for me today. Again, we talked about the Second Amendment stuff on military installations. We talked about the gun numbers for both defensive uses and for violence, and what those statistics kind of look like. Remember, don't be a fool. If you hear somebody say something about gun violence, how bad it is, do some research. Don't just ask Google, but look at several different research articles or wherever, and just find out for yourself, right? Don't take somebody's word for it. Do your own research. Well, do me a favor, if you could, like and subscribe to this channel. And if you could just send this channel out to your friends that might have an interest in firearms or may want to know about training and things like that. And do me a favor, if you want to hear something else, you want to talk about something else, or if you disagree, please, if you disagree with me on something, leave it a comment down below. I'm happy to discuss it with you. I get on there when I can, and I respond to as many comments on YouTube as I can. So do me a favor, do that for me, and you will be helping out this channel and helping out Fronsite as we go forward. Well, I look forward to seeing you on the next one. It'll be after the NRA conference. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome to Fronsite.